What does it take to scale to 7 figures and beyond and grow with purpose? Tune in for stories, strategies, and tactics from founders and business leaders who've been there and done that. Welcome to another episode of the Scaling Business Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to be catching up with John Lindsay. John is a technology and telecommunications industry expert. I was doing my homework and I just worked out you've been in the industry for 40 years.
That's why I look old. 'Cause I am.
No. That's good. That's experience and consistency. And the other thing about you is you're also an investor, an advisor, and a really good mentor. I remember about 6 or so years ago when I'd just taken a break from business and decided to go back to the corporate life. I took on a job as head of digital / CIO role. And the first person I could think of to have a chat with around what was going to be my strategy as a technology leader in the business was you. And we had a coffee and you helped me put together a bit of a game plan of what to do. And ended up, that was really, really helpful. So that was a while ago. So...
Yeah, well pre-COVID.
Well pre-COVID, yeah, when people could meet freely, now we're back to meeting freely. Wow. I wanted to first of all, before we get into all the juicy stuff about investing and building businesses, I wanted to go a little bit back to the early days for you. Was business always on the cards for you? Were you one of those lemonade stand kids who... early hustlers? How did you get your start into business?
I put my first business together when I was at school with Marty Govan and a guy called William Carney.
Okay.
And we were GCL Systems.
Oh.
But we registered that as a company when we'd all turned 18. So that's why I've been in business for 40 years. And that was an IT solutions sort of shop, and we wrote computer software and we created a really interesting gadget for partially sighted people to be able to use a computer. It sort of was essentially a text magnifier, but it like worked with a terminal and like with a serial terminal. So this is old school.
Yep.
And we created some gadgets with the Royal Society for the Blind, and William Carney created a couple of amazing multitasking, multi-user operating systems, multi-T and a thing we called VM. Which is just virtual machines.
Yeah, okay.
And it was literally virtual machines running on 386s. So yes, that was that's the origin story from 40 years ago, and I failed my way through university at Adelaide Uni studying computer science, and I wasn't a great student, and I was always distracted by being in business.
Okay.
And then this internet thing came along, and I was just captivated by it, and I learned how to do the internet protocol, and I learned how to do FreeBSD, and I built a little ISP in the spare room of my house on Kensington Road.
Wow.
I'm sure that the next tenants in that house couldn't work out why there were 32 phone lines, but there were.
Was that stuff even legal?
Oh yeah. No, it was more than legal, and it was the Wild West. It was in the days before the telecommunication industry ombudsman existed, and that was then rolled into a business that was known as iiNet SA, because the co-founder of iiNet was living here in Adelaide with a guy called Lee Hart, because he was chasing a lady who was from Whyalla, who had sort of come back to Adelaide, and so he was sort of wooing her from a camp bed in Lee's study, surrounded by Lee's little ISP. there's a whole backstory around that of how it is that we came to set up an ISP. But we set up an ISP in Weymouth Street, and then we sold it to some people from Sydney who had, turned out were pretty dodgy. But we managed to get our cash and get out. And I went and ran Chariot Internet for a little while, and then I went over to Perth and ran iiNet's network, sort of as the network operations manager. I can't remember what my exact title was, but I was effectively running the network for iiNet.
Is that how iiNet actually got started? The original iiNet?
No, the original iiNet got started in Perth with Michael Malone and Michael O'Reilly in Michael Malone's parents' garage. Really was literally in their garage.
Typical garage technology startup.
It was a classic garage ISP.
Yeah.
And that business, it just grew organically. It was all about, just providing a great service because everyone wanted to connect to the internet. There was always a question for customers, which was, do you really want a help desk, or would you like us to have more phone lines to dial in on?
Yeah. Okay.
So Michael Malone's father gave him, great business advice when he was young. Michael Malone's father was a fencing contractor.
Okay.
Built asbestos fences all across Perth. And Michael's father's advice was, find someone who needs something done, a fence to be built, quote them a price that you do it for, do the work really well, give them an invoice, get paid. And Michael really took that to heart. Like, it's, there's each of those steps is really important, and delivering the value and doing what it is that you said you were going to do, and then actually charging for it, and that's really important too. It's something that people in in business, in like start business, early stage business, people who are working as consultants, sort of struggle with that important bit. You've got to just make that little time every week to make sure that the invoices get out, and you've got to use that, use something to capture the hours and not be afraid to to bill the hours. And then you have happy customers and happy clients, and they tell other people, and that's how you grow a business, organically. Like really organically. We had the .com crash while I was in Perth with iiNet, and I came to Adelaide, and in fact I was going to go and work for Steve Baxter at iiNet, and I kind of stabbed him in the back. It took him a while to get over that, which is really quite fair and reasonable. But Simon Hackett had said to me previously. Like, Simon Hackett and I have been friends since high school.
Simon Hackett, the Internode guy.
The Internode guy. He and I met at Angle Park, at the Angle Park Computer Centre, because we were both really, really geeky, and we would go to summer school, for these sort of access days at the Angle Park Computer Centre, and we met at Angle Park. And then we met again the first day, my first day of uni. He's a couple of years older than me, and he sort of took me off around to the computer centre and got my account activated. So I had access to the VAX servers, which was awesome. So I ended up at Internode in, was it the very end of 2000, just as my daughter was born, who you've met in the past because she interviewed you when she was at school. And Internode, again, a business that just thrived on on delivering a really good service at a reasonable price. Internode wasn't known as being cheap, but it was known as being where the South Australian government got its internet service from. And that was a really important reference. So when businesses in South Australia wanted to get on the internet, it came up that Internode was a place to go to. It wasn't until much later that Telstra became the place to go to, and Telstra became the place to go to because they spent a fortune on marketing.
Oh, so does it that Telstra wasn't that big, or it wasn't that big in South Australia?
Telstra was late to the internet. They didn't see the value there. So in the early ISP days, you'd get 30 phone lines in the spare room of your house in suburbia, and or a couple of hundred pairs. I remember that down in Westbourne Park, where the hub of the Australian Public Access Network Association sort of servers were, which we all used in those early days to create our little not-for-profit ISPs when we were all learning how this internet thing worked. But yeah, Telstra was really late to the party, and they didn't really understand it. There's a beautiful story from Telstra's wholesale guy who said to me one day that had the problem that they had a customer in Melbourne who hadn't was a young guy who'd set up a dial-up ISP, and one weekday the customers of this ISP started calling Telstra saying they were ringing the number and it just wasn't working, and could they check the line, and it turned out there was nothing sort of wrong. It was just things weren't being answered. But it was creating so many calls to the customer service line that Telstra sent somebody around to the site, knocked on the door, and this woman answered, and they said, is this guy here? And she's like, no, he's at school. I said, look, there's some problem with his internet service. Oh, yes. He didn't clean his room, so I turned everything off. And Telstra actually said, tell you what, how about we send a cleaner to clean his room so you can turn it all back on?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. That's crazy.
Bless him for his entrepreneurial flair. That certainly was the pre-TIO.
Oh, wow. So that's kind of like how
that was years and years ago.
Yeah.
But just a whole other world. But at a time where Telstra did not understand that this internet thing would be valuable, and they didn't really understand it would be valuable until the early days of DSL. Like really understand. Like they created Big Pond, but it was DSL where things really started to get interesting.
So you go through. So those are the early days of getting to cutting your teeth in the industry. You start your business with your friends, transition it to a point in time whereby you're able to now start work for the bigger ISP. Walk me through the transition now from, were you always when you're working with the big ISPs, were you still doing your consultancy? Were you still building a business on the side, or did you now come back to business after the big exit for?
When I was working for Chariot, for iiNet, for Internode, I was very much 100% an employee.
Yeah.
I mean, I had when we created the iiNet in South Australia, I was an owner.
Yeah.
Like that was a business that it's a classic thing. You own it, you pay yourself next to nothing, you work 70 hours a week. You you work kind of in and on the business all at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas as time progressed, I was definitely like very much just an employee. Although of course I ended up being a very small owner in Internode by the time we sold it. But that is because I really did sell my soul to become management. Over those years, I did less and less hands-on technical stuff. At Chariot, I was like the guy who ran the network. In Perth, I was the guy who managed the guys who ran the network and ran the servers. And when I came to Adelaide, I was very much the manager of the staff, and just didn't touch the tech sort of internally. Although I continued to kind of keep my skills current. So I was very much someone who learnt how to be a manager, and I was afraid of managing people for years. I did not enjoy it, and in fact, it wasn't until I went and did a kind of MBA feeder course in Adelaide Uni's University of Adelaide, as it certainly was then, business school, and one of the modules in that was a sort of leading and managing staff, and I actually had some training in how to manage people, and that made a big difference. And I stopped being scared of managing staff and scared the responsibility of managing staff. And I don't mind doing it, these days. But of course, I sort of sold my soul more and more, and finally sort of ended up on boards, which is sort of the abstraction of everything.
Yeah.
But everyone on a board brings a certain set of skills, and there's an endless supply of chartered accountants and lawyers on boards, particularly in Australia, and a real abundance of people with deep technical and technology experience, and sort of like that domain experience. So I think that leads to companies making setting strategy that's not founded in reality.
So they're kind of optimizing. They're optimizing the balance sheets and spreadsheets, as opposed to looking at not understanding what exactly the business needs, or how the business function, how the product is actually made.
Yes, exactly.
The distribution.
Yeah.
It's just looking at the numbers,
What are the factors that the customers really are looking for, evaluating? What are the features of the of the product? It's all well and good to talk about the sort of features and benefits, but at the end of the day, there is a consumers measure quality, and whether it's like speed of download or reliability of connection, or availability of technical support, or whatever. But it's very easy just building a spreadsheet to look at, here's the revenue and here are the costs, and how can we drive up the revenue. I mean, the harsh reality for the internet game for most of its existence has been that the price, per month was kind of fixed, and now with the NBN, everyone pays like $90 to $100 a month. But it's it is actually important to really understand what is being valued by the by the businesses, consumers.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to talk about the transition from finishing off with Internode. Were you always investing in businesses before, or does that something comes after you finished with the Internode and had your exit?
I started sort of seriously investing after the Internode exit, largely because I didn't really have any money prior to that. So there were a few businesses in that era that I invested in because I knew the founders and they listed on the stock exchange, and it's like, oh well, I know these people and I could get an allocation of shares at the initial public offering, and they did well, and that was good. But I still at that point didn't really understand how you value a business, how you value a business that is growing.
Yeah.
And how do you, there's a few things that you kind of understand intellectually. The price of a listed company, on any given day really is what the market thinks the future earnings of that company will be. But how do you actually evaluate what you think the future earnings of that business will be? And people who specialize in that spend months building very complicated spreadsheets with a lot of parameters.
With a lot of parameters. What's your criteria? Because you've invested obviously public, like business which have got, which you can they've already got the reports here, and you can easily go. I tend to look at public companies as it's out there, you go looking for them, you find the information, but then you've had businesses whereby you've invested privately, maybe they're looking for a seed round. I think you're involved with SA, is it SA?
The Southern Angels.
Southern Angels, yeah.
I've been a member of that for a while. I've only made a few investments in that, but it's just not a reflection of Southern Angels. In fact, Southern Angels have unearthed some really good investments, and the new East End Ventures that JD shared and Josh, who is the guy who runs Southern Angels, they are really sort of trying to bring that discipline of how do you value investment opportunities, and how do you essentially they're the kind of pre-filter, so give them a pile of money every year, and their fund will then go and invest in early stage businesses. So you too can enjoy the white bare knuckle ride of the initial enthusiasm and the sort of pit of despair when you have to raise some more capital.
What's your process of evaluating private companies, whether it's company that you've gone and looked at the sought out to invest in, or people that have come back to you and said, we're looking for investor? What are some of the things you're looking for in the business?
I think that one of the really important things is the business plan actually feasible? Like, how much does it rely on luck? Luck is important. I've made money because I have been lucky. I cannot really honestly say I have made money because I have been clever. I have been fortunate. But the business plan needs to be actually viable, and it needs to not rely on too much that is, technically challenging to create, to find, to deliver, or is definitely needs to not rely on technology that is just magical. There are I do a lot of stuff in the renewable energy space these days, and what always scares me about hydrogen business plans is that there's this bit where they kind of gloss over acquiring cheap electricity, and then they gloss over just how expensive it is to turn that cheap electricity into hydrogen, and then they gloss over how difficult it is to store and transport that hydrogen. But overall, it's going to be great because it's hydrogen and it's going to be green. So I've seen many internet business plans over the years that have the same kind of problem about them, that you have to be incredibly optimistic about the ability to optimize certain parts of it, and then there's this bit in the middle of it that you look at and say, and that bit there requires technology that just doesn't exist. There's that for that to work, you need a data compression algorithm that doesn't exist, and that a lot of people have invested a lot of time and money in trying to create to date. So why should I think that you have actually got that sorted? And it's like, we have, but we can't show it to you, because it's, proprietary, it's secret, whatever. It's like, that's nice. That's nice. Show me but I can't give you any money.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, that's, but even when a plan is, sort of fundamentally feasible, it does really come down to growth. Where is the growth going to come from, and is the growth going to cost you? What multiple of your earnings is your growth going to cost you?
Okay.
And for how long will the investment community give you the cash that you need to keep that growth going? The best businesses are always the ones that are self-funding. The business model in the early days of the internet was largely around, if we sell, for every time we sell, say, 20 accounts, we have enough, we're generating enough income that we can afford to get another phone line and install another modem. And if your spreadsheet worked like that, then you would grow, and there was an amount of money per month per service above which you could actually afford to do that, and below which you would slowly go broke. And so those days were easy. Like, you'd find all of the services which were charging below that, and you would wait for them to go broke and acquire their assets, and you would pick, and this is a great, general piece of business advice. In the early days of the internet, it was important to work out who your competitor was, and that still applies today. Choose your competitor wisely. Yeah. And in the case of being an internet provider, choose Telstra. because they were always the sort of most expensive and the one who attracted the most media attention when things went wrong. So
when you say choose your competitor wisely, from a business point of view, how do you envision that looking?
So if you are selling a SaaS service, what is it competing with? And then don't pick some other SaaS service that gives the service away for free every month. Choose something which is expensive, or choose something that's not a SaaS service which is expensive, because you want the comparison to be something where you are demonstrating a lot of value and where the price can be held, sort of as high as possible, because you can always, if you have to, lower your price. It's really hard to raise it. Really hard to raise it. Borders on impossible. It needs something external to happen, like the NBN to come along and just take over the access networks and set the price, and then keep pushing that price upwards. That forces the market to actually charge more. Telstra, increase the cost of a landline or of a telephony service. They increase that price, year after year. I mean, phone numbers still exist. I don't know anyone who actually has a landline anymore. Do you know anyone who has a landline?
I don't know, because I keep getting all these ads of having a phone line here, and I'm like, oh, so you actually do have that.
The phone lines are still a thing. I know. Aussie Broadband will give you a phone number with your Aussie Broadband service if you want it. I don't know. I assume that most of the ISPs do that, but that's a VoIP service, and and those services are like completely commoditized.
They're completely commoditized. Going back to the putting back the investor's hat on, so you look at how you evaluate a business, and then you invest in you obviously go ahead and invest. So you've had businesses whereby you've invested and it's just a small stake, and I guess you don't have a lot of control much. But then you've also invested in businesses whereby you've got a bit more control in terms of either having a board seat and stuff like that. Walk me through that whole process of when you get to a business that you invest in, when you get into the board seat and you'll be able to have control, what are some of the first things you're looking at changing?
That's an interesting question and a hard one, because there isn't a formula. There isn't a formula, and boards, good boards, have members who bring a wide range of experience. Not all just chartered accountants and lawyers. But they also move towards achieving a kind of consensus about decisions. Now, we've got to avoid the groupthink phenomenon. That is hard. But the things which I'm looking for are trying to make the business sort of internally accountable and honest with itself. The things which I've been involved with, which have ended up being sort of the most successful, have generally had limited resources, and I think that there is a risk. When you're over-resourced, startups have this tendency to sort of spend money on, foosball tables and beanbags and so forth. And it's nice to build, a staff culture, but it's also important to just kind of get down and do the work, and to be disciplined about how you sort of, use those shareholder funds. So on quite a few occasions I've joined boards because people I've been involved with have made a major investment in the business, and then making sure that the business sort of uses those funds wisely keeps count of that funding and does it in a sort of tight enough time frame. It's always the warning sign when you're going into the March sort of board meeting and they're promising they should have the have the December accounts finalised. It's like, huh? Just show me the management accounts for last week. Like to just see where things are at. What do your debtors look like today? I know you know who owes you money today. What does that look like today? Not the numbers you've kind of tidied up, for the end of the month, as much as possible, and at a point in time that looks, particularly sexy. Let's just see where that is at right now. And I'm not, I don't have sort of the specific examples of this, but this is the kind of thing that in businesses that I've been involved with where have had that kind of entry usually after a cash injection. But then comes the grind, and there's a company I've been involved with for the last 10 years that has gone through cycles, and things can change so very quickly. It only takes the loss of one or two really big clients, and suddenly you've gone from making a modest profit to making quite a nasty loss. And enterprise clients are really hard to land. The sales cycle takes sometimes years. So but technology can change under your feet, and so that's something that matters now. The AI thing, and agentic AI that is going to be as disruptive for business as Chinese electric car companies are for Western car companies. That technology change can just smash you.
They can smash you. Walking through, I wanted to dwell on the board part a little bit. How do you deal with situations when you've had to effect, like you've gone in there? Obviously, the job of the board is to keep company accountable. What's your strategy? How have you dealt with a situation whereby, okay, you're looking at it, they're not doing the right thing, and you need to make, you need to recommend big decisions? How are you having those how do you navigate that whole process?
I think the Institute of Company Directors, of which I'm a graduate member, and I recommend the Institute of Company Directors course.
So should you recommend anyone who's a company director to get it?
I recommend doing that course, especially, any company director or anybody who is a senior sort of, executive or officer in a company. And they have various scholarships and so forth to make it sort of more accessible for people who might be working in the not-for-profit space, so so forth. But I found it really, really valuable. But the Institute of Company Directors always reminds boards that their first responsibility is to hire and occasionally fire the chief executive. The board is providing governance. It is there to look after the business. It's actually not there to look after the shareholders. Although you have a fiduciary duty to the shareholders, your primary duty is to the company itself, and to make sure that the company has the resources to devise a strategy and execute it. So if the company doesn't have a strategy that's working, then and if the management team is not recognizing this and not taking steps to come up with a strategy that's viable and execute it, then the correct way to deal with that is to deal with the chief executive, to support the chief executive in the decisions that have to be made about the executive and management team, and occasionally to have the awkward conversation with the chief executive that says it's been fun, but it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is what has to be done.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, what you're there to do is to ensure that the company is able to survive and prosper, but fundamentally that it's able to survive so that it can provide service to customers, and that it has the staff that the staff don't just sort of rage quit or quiet quit or just disappear.
Disappear.
Because you don't have a business if you don't have staff. So you have to the board has to kind of keep that gentle pressure on, but it isn't up to the board to come up with strategy for the company. That happens in small businesses, but that's because directors of small businesses are usually owners and executives in the business. But absolutely in listed companies, non-executive directors, they're not there to dream up a strategy. It's like, what you should be doing. It's like you're there to have the conversation with the people who are supposed to be coming up with the strategy.
So they come up with a strategy to evaluate.
Yeah, to like evaluate the strategy and is this business proposal? Is this like talking to someone who's looking for investment? Because that's what you're really doing. Like, is this a good use of the company's resources? Do you have an actual plan for this thing that you want to do? Like, and is that plan more than just, well, it'll be cool?
Yeah.
It'd be really good if. How many conversations in business are like, wouldn't it be good if?
If I could only have 1% of this big $1 billion, then we'll make $100 million. It's always a classic line with the speech. If you could only have this percentage, so that makes a lot of sense. So I want to dwell a little bit on that part of it. You said at some point you might have to hire or fire the chief executive. What's your process of evaluating a good chief executive? In terms of like, what are you looking for in a CEO of a company?
Someone who is very focused on the company, who treats the company's resources with the appropriate respect, who is actually having agreed a course of action with the board, is then actually executing that course of action, and is not bringing trivial issues back to the board. So listed company chief executives have over time become incredibly well paid, and the theory is that they're meant to this is meant to attract the best talent and then provide them incentives to create growth. The sad reality of this part of the 21st century is there's way too many examples of chief executives who don't seem to be living up to that.
Yeah.
And then when the performance of the company slides, seem to be absent, or seem to be pursuing their hobbies, like trying to disassemble the US Federal Public Service, or be the chief executive or apparent chief executive of way too many companies at the same time. I think looking at your Warren Buffett book on the bookshelf he says that it's one of the fundamental things you're looking for when you're investing in a business is does the board and the executives, do they have good character? Do they are they like responsible fiduciaries? Are they treating the shareholders' funds, with respect, and are they focused on the company? So a chief executive who has, they have to have a good understanding of the industry they're in. They have to have a good understanding of the business that they lead. I think that is one of the kind of differences too between a sort of chief executive and someone who is sort of a general manager. Someone in a chief executive role is external and internal, sort of, looking. They can kind of, work in both of those spheres. And I think that's one of the things that happens after a company has an initial public offering, that you have built this company up from your parents' garage. You have reached the point where you have thousands of people working for you, and then you go to the public markets and you say, please invest in my business. We will. The prospectus is like that one time where you're really actually kind of making some promises about making some money. Yeah. Make as few promises as possible, and then off you go and run this business. But you've gone from being someone who has a focus kind of almost entirely on the business, on the employees, on the industry, to someone who now has got this new set of stakeholders who matter, and they're the shareholders, and particularly the institutional shareholders. So instead of 7 days a week really caring about the business and having that time every day where you talk to the executive team, and that time every day where you kind of wander around and meet the frontline staff, and that time when you go and do industry podcasts or go to conferences or go to networking breakfast or whatever, suddenly it's like 7 days a week really focused on the shareholders, because that's what's really valued. It's like, how am I going to raise capital next? What are my results looking like? Am I actually going to be making a profit? Will I be able to pay the expected dividend? And so the mindset, that sort of founder chief executive mindset versus listed company chief executive mindset, they are actually different, and it is rare that a private company CEO, even someone who's actually managed to work their way up through the sort of tiers of management, the classic Fibonacci sequence of headcount that really reflects the layers beneath. Like there's certain sizes that's as you start to grow, it's really hard to get beyond about 24. Because the steps up get larger and larger, and you have to put in more and more management, and we know from years and years of research that one human being can really only manage maybe 8 people well, like directly. So that sets a limit the size of the company. So the skill set and the experiences for private versus listed CEO quite different, and so that then creates the the challenge for a board, because typically you start putting together the kind of board that you need for a listed company as you are approaching that. So the people who are your directors, they already know how to hire and fire listed company CEOs. They know what they're looking for in a CEO for a listed company, and so they quite often know that the CEO, the founder CEO with the charisma and everything, is not actually going to make it as a listed company CEO.
Oh, so you reckon the person who founds the company tends to not be able to take the company all the way and become the listed company CEO? Is that?
I think that it's unusual for them to survive very long as the CEO.
Because I guess as it gets to a certain point, as a founder, you're still very attached to the whole value chain. Well, it gets to a point in time where...
But you just don't have the experience and skill set
yeah.
to manage keeping all of these investors and other sort of the stakeholders that you have for your company when you are listed. And those, the stakeholders, definitely the shareholders, and particularly the institutional shareholders, the people who if they decide that they don't think that the company is travelling well, they might own 5 or 10 or 15% of your company. And if they really decide that you're not actually, that the company or that you, the CEO, are not really doing a good job, they might just say, stuff it, we're just going to sell. We're just going to sell our shares. And if you are if you haven't been listed for very long, if your business hasn't reported, many early on quarters or halves of revenue and profit, the sign of a major institutional investor selling, then other institutional investors, say, well, why did they sell? And so just managing that is something that most kind of entrepreneurial founder CEOs struggle with. Now, there are people out there who are CEO coaches, and they provide a great service because they're providing that kind of mentoring and training, and typically have the kind of contact.
Is that what you recommend for a founder CEO, or how would you help if you had to sit down with a founder CEO who is starting to scale their business to a point in time whereby they might even get to that listing stage or not even listing stage? What are some of the things you would say to someone as a founder CEO to help them get through that, to help them level up? They might not list in the end, but I guess as a company grows past a certain stage, it will start to outgrow the skills. What are some of the things, if you're having a pep talk with this founder CEO, like what are some of the things you would recommend to them?
I think that finding a sort of suitably experienced chair for the board, someone who has had that experience. They are really good listed company chairs, have often been a CEO themselves. They have that contact with those institutional investors. They know them personally. They have them in the proverbial Rolodex. The contact numbers are in their phone. They can, and they know all the sort of decision makers in the institutional, investors. But they've had that experience of what is it that those investors are really looking for, which is basically growth with low risk. That's what they're ideally looking for.
Okay.
That they can open the door because that institutional investor, and then the whole point about institutional investors, they are the people who've got lots of money to invest, and the the biggest challenge when you're a sort of small business looking for investment is that you can get a bit of investment in, but then you kind of go back to those people and say, hey, look, we've had some really good initial results, and we've got some customers and they're paying us some money and things are looking pretty positive. And now all we need to do is raise about 10 times more cash than we did when we all got around the table at the pizza place and everybody agreed to put $10,000 in. So if you could just kindly, deposit $100,000 in the account, then we can get on with the next stage.
Yeah.
Now, and then after that is now if you could just give us $1 million each, and so getting the investors sort of lined up who can make that sort of relatively early investment, and that's where people like East End Ventures, JD Shared and Josh, what they're doing is trying to identify businesses that they're beyond the family and friends round, but they've got something, they've demonstrated that it's promising, that it's it's still high risk. Institutions are not going to put people's superannuation funds into it yet, but they know that they are going to have to do 2 or 3 rounds. Like if this thing that they're investing in is successful, there's the expectation that the founders are going to come back in a year and ask for more money.
Yeah. And
if you as the investor aren't in a position to do that, well then you're probably going to lose your investment because nobody else is. So so there's this little set of a kind of ladder or set of stairs that you're climbing with that investment. So a really good chair has the contacts right across that community. They've got the contacts in the the family offices, the high net worth individuals who will, for the right story and the right people with the right sort of track record, invest in things that are quite early stage. But that chair's also got contacts at the well-known, the well-known funds, and they've got the contacts in the big advisory firms, the accounting firms, the people that you're going to have to, have analysed the business plan and say, writing as vague as possible a letter saying we've reviewed this and we can't see that it's obviously going to fail.
That's good. You've been involved in companies before the public stage.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the question for you is, when a business hits a certain point, what are the markers for you to think, okay, this has grown enough as it is, we've probably raised a little bit of money on our own, it's time to grow public.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the markers for you, and how do we prepare that business to grow public? Is there a certain revenue? Is it a certain...
It's definitely a path to profitability. It's being able to have a story where you can show the investors. But the point about a public offering is you are offering these shares not just to sophisticated investors, not just to people with high income or high net worth. You are offering them to the public. You are offering them to the proverbial mums and dads in suburbia.
Yeah, mums and pops in, yeah.
And so you are being held to a very high standard that you are likely to not cost them their savings. So so that is that is how you have really got to get the business sort of shaped. But reality these days is there is so much private equity, there's so much institutional investment money that it is that we're seeing very few initial public offerings, right, relative to history, that businesses that have really good growth prospects are being invested in by private markets, not by public markets, and that investment is often found through the connections that are being made by a really good chair or by a really good, well-connected executive who's had sort of that kind of experience, has the connections with the money markets, as someone who's come out of a company who've had those relationships before. But there is definitely a sort of process that a private company goes through to be able to be invested in sort of externally. I guess the thing which is the fundamental difference between a private company and a public company, and there's a lot of unlisted public companies out there. I'm a director of an unlisted public company. Mm-hmm. So in an unlisted public company, I can sell my shares to you, and I expect very timely and very detailed financial reports from the company, because I have to behave like I was a listed public company, just I'm not actually listed. The downside to that is I have to do all of those things, and my customers can therefore see my financial reports. They might even see, if the reports are detailed enough, if the customer is big enough, they might even be able to recognise themselves in those reports, and they can see how profitable they are as a customer, which then might lead to awkward conversations like, you charge me too much money,
They've got some leverage,
or your business looks like it's going broke. I don't want to be your customer anymore. So these are these are the downsides to that kind of level of exposure. Other things which happen if you're a classic startup, you've gone and bought a shelf company, sort of 4 or 5 years ago, you've got a bunch of of shareholders, staff, options, and so on. You've now got to just go and clean everything up. Like, you can't just say, oh, well, that guy, he's got some Class B shares, but he doesn't work for us anymore, but we'll just get them back from him. It's like, when will you do that? I'm just going to write that down here in this diary of stuff that we're doing as we head towards getting any external investment in, because until you've done that, you can't actually get any external investment in, because the external investors, when they do their due diligence, when they diligently look at your business, they will spot these awkward problems. They will spot that you haven't lodged a tax return for the last 3 years. They'll spot that you're in arrears on your BAS with the tax office by 6 months. They'll all those sort of things. So you have to be squeaky clean, and you need to not be in the middle of legal disputes. That is the classic thing to kind of spoil a capital raising, is to launch a legal action against the people who are trying to raise capital, because now the investors are like, well, what's this about? So I guess it's one of the reasons why actually having a relatively short time frame of the existence of the corporate entity can be useful. Hasn't had time to get too many scratches and dents. It's easier to sell a 2-year-old car than a 12-year-old car.
I've had that. I've covered a lot of questions around the process of taking a company public and preparing for going public, and What about if you just want to run your business and not necessarily want to go public? Would you still recommend having a board? And how do you manage a board in situations whereby you're looking for oversight and not necessarily that person to help you get to that point?
I think that in business, having business partners is something which generally makes it more likely that the business will be successful. There are always exceptions to that, but most of the people who've been most successful that I know have had one or two business partners, and those partners, have generally been, the other directors of the business, have generally had a large, an equal or a large equity stake in the business, and having that group, everyone sort of keeps each other sane and honest and focused. It's often said that three people in a tech startup, the sales guy who can sort of sell the vision to customers and to investors, the tech guy who actually delivers the technology, and the kind of admin person who actually makes sure that the invoices are sent out, the bills are paid, that the resources are there, that everyone's got a laptop and the Microsoft 365 licenses have all been paid for, and just all that kind of really boring stuff. And those three roles you are looking for in a business, and sometimes they're all just one person, but it's usually much better if there are two or three people looking after those things. So that's my sort of advice there for people who are trying to create something, or are trying to sort of move forward, or trying to put things in place so their business can grow, is to be able to really succinctly answer the question. And maybe you actually can outsource those responsibilities well, or hire people, or get a contractor, get a bookkeeper, get somebody who can actually look after that admin role. But a tech startup that doesn't have someone with the gift of the gab who can sell, and doesn't have someone who absolutely understands the technology, like a warning sign for me is when people have actually outsourced the development of their software in a company that is all about software. It's like, well, maybe it'll work, but you're probably going to spend 3 or 4 times as much on your development as you would if you had the people in-house doing that for you.
Even owning the IP as well, because if you had someone else developing your the technology, they could potentially have some tricky contract that allows them to own your IP or some segments of it.
And generally, it's because most software houses have an enormous library of code that they've developed over time, and when they actually write an application for you, they are just dipping into that grab bag of pieces, and they're not really doing anything wrong, and they're certainly not doing anything that's in breach of the contract that they have with you, because they have a contract with you, and if you don't really understand what that means, well, tough. And I've seen that on a number of occasions. I've certainly seen businesses who are trying to avoid appointing directors, because the first rule of directors is once you've appointed them, if they are an independent director, if they're a non-executive director, the only way they stop being a director is when they resign. You can't sack a director. So if you have a private company, proprietary limited company, and you appoint a director, they are a director until they resign or die or go bankrupt. So your degrees of freedom, as the chair or the chief executive or the managing director or the founder, are really limited once you've appointed a director. So they are there for good, because they now have a responsibility to the business, not to you. In public companies, directors are appointed for a term, for a period of time, and have to be re-elected. So the shareholders have that control. But in a proprietary limited company, you're sort of like a director until you resign, or go bankrupt or die. So it's a serious responsibility, and it's one that can't just be taken away from you.
Wow, I didn't realize that. So you have to be very careful who you bring in your company as a director.
So that's what leads to having advisory boards that are, not really a board. They're not really directors. They are just a group of advisors.
Gotcha.
And then that advisory board needs to be careful to not actually act as if they were directors, because then they can be, even though they haven't been appointed as a director, if they act sufficiently like a director, they can be considered to be a shadow director, which then kind of comes with all the responsibilities of being a director. The ASIC can basically say, as far as we're concerned, you are a director. But I was just on an advisory board, and but you attended every single board meeting and, voted on all of the company's business decisions. So, that's something. If you're invited to be on an advisory board, be very careful to make sure that you are not actually becoming a shadow director.
That makes a lot of sense. How do you recruit those advisory board and compensate them for the business? Especially a private business, obviously, not a traded.
That is one of those, sort of business networking things. Finding people who finding people who know people, finding people who are, finding people who have experience, identifying what the gaps are in your business, and then trying to be careful that you're not just trying to get free or cheap consultants, because often you're better off just actually hiring the consultants to do that technical thing, provide that service. I see many a young lawyer being kind of recruited to boards and advisory boards by people who really think they're going to get some commercial law advice, for cheap. And then in terms of what you end up having to pay these people, that is its own interesting challenge. Often those advisors or directors are being paid in shares, in scrip. That is a thing. Sometimes they're being paid cash because the business actually is profitable.
It's possible making money,
or maybe the cornerstone investor, has someone they would really like to have on the board or have on an advisory board, and actually are saying, well, you're going to have to pay this person, and in investing this money in you, I have this expectation that you're going to spend some of that on actually paying this person.
How do you suggest to founders to prepare for the different transitions, if that makes any sense? So, because I start here as a founder. Let's say I'm here as a founder. I start this nice little studio business, and it goes and goes and goes and goes, and it gets upon a time whereby it will grow beyond me, and I have to bring in external CEOs or things like that. What would you recommend, having worked with founder leaders, how would you suggest that they prepare for the different transitions and some of the pitfalls they should avoid?
It's interesting and hard question. I think getting a handle on what all the roles are in your business and who performs those roles early. The E-Myth? That's
E-Myth, yeah. Michael Garber.
Yeah, that's a book from 25 plus years ago.
It's a great book.
That's a great book.
Classic.
Because he's really getting you to think about that. So, and thinking about the Fibonacci sequence. One like the sum of the previous two. So 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8.
Yeah.
Intriguingly, those numbers that it's like the same as as how many sunflower seeds there are in each as it spirals out.
Yeah.
They are the sort of sizes of a business, of something that's being managed, where each time you grow by to the next number, you need just a little bit more management in the business, because you can really only manage about 8 people, and 8 might be too many for you. You might be great, you might be able to do 12, but perhaps it's more likely you can do 4 or 5. And recognizing what it is that is your particular sort of value and skill that you bring, like why are you a special employee of your company? You own the company, but why should you be working there? What's the job you should be doing? And what are the things that you do well, and what are the things that you do poorly, and how can you find other people to do the things that you do poorly? How can you find more people who do stuff that you do well, so you can concentrate on less and less things and concentrate more on developing the business, or whether it is that you're great at finding the customers, or whether you're great at working out what the products are that your thing should have, or maybe your special skill is actually recruiting people, but it's probably not everything. So that I think is like the most important thing. Work on the business, not try to not work in the business too much. But then you got to be realistic. But just every time you grow to a certain point, how are you really going to spend that money?
That makes a lot of sense. As we conclude, what are some of the things you're personally excited about, whether it's in the world of investing or some of the trends you're seeing in the technology point of view and how that shapes business? What are some of the things you're excited about moving forward with business and some of the people the environment you're working with?
I think we're in a period of amazing disruption. I think that too many people are looking at too narrow a narrative about what is going on. I think that that AI is amazing and also very misunderstood at the same time. I think that a lot of investors will lose a lot of money on AI that doesn't go well. The Buffett view of the whole sort of tech, history, the tech wreck. If you invested the same amount of money in all of the search companies, 25 years ago, in Lycos, those Google people, and Yahoo and all of the other companies who were like indexing and kind of aggregating the content of the internet, you would basically break even. If you had invested everything in Google, you would have made a lot of money. But who was to say in 1998 which thing was going to succeed. I mean, hey, it was obviously going to be AOL, right?
Yeah. yeah, because they were big then.
Huge.
Yeah.
So I think that that China is has really kind of broken free on the technical development. I was in China 20 years ago, and my observation at the time was because you could hire an electronic engineer, back then for less than $20,000 a year, and even less than that 20 years ago, that you could. So Huawei was just this massive campus, the size of the Adelaide between the four terraces.
Wow.
In Shenzhen, a campus with roads and traffic lights, and just thousands and thousands and thousands of people working there, and my observation was that with when they work out how to train MBAs, and when they work out how to really be innovative rather than really just sort of copying everything, they will be unstoppable. And 20 years later, that's kind of the position that we're in. But most people just want to believe that China is still way behind the West, and can't build chips, and can't write software, and can't innovate, and they're wrong. So AI and China disruption, and what happens next? Who knows? But keep close. Keep close tabs on the technology leaders and the emerging, businesses, and don't hold on to the past too hard.
One thing I was going to add, my final question is, you've been through booms and busts and the new next thing in technology. I mean, you're there pre-internet, and a lot of all those kind of like emerging things. Is there any parting strategy you would have for someone who is kind of worried about all this AI and all this, how all this the technology is going to come in and take over? Is there any advice you would give them to them in terms of preparing for disruptions and changes?
Don't hold on too tight to the past.
To the past, yeah. I guess.
And keep learning, keep reading, keep exploring. Particularly if you're involved in technology, don't put too much trust in things that are AI powered. Don't they are expensive, high-speed hallucination machines. They are just, making a good guess as to what the next word is. But that there are multiple, areas of machine learning. It's not all just sort of large language models. There are lots of other areas, and that technology is moving at an incredible pace.
Exciting. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been lots of fun.
Lots of fun. Anywhere people can find you, connect with you?
I'm Big JSL on Mastodon. You can also find me on Blue Sky, although I don't really use that. I'm still on Facebook, but I only accept friend requests from people that I've had a drink with. I don't do X. I am on LinkedIn. I'm john.lindsay@gmail.com, or john@lindsaystrategic.com, or john@appcentric.com.au, which is my IT consulting business. So they're all the ways to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, John. It's been great.
Cool. Awesome.